Over a year ago, I made a video about the uncertain state of the Mega Man franchise. Ever since then, a lot of things have happened, and well, my original video have aged like milk. With the announcement of a brand new entry in the Classic series at the Game Awards and the Star Force collection coming up this year, now it's the best time to be a Mega Man fan. And what a better way to celebrate the return of the Blue Bomber than replaying all the Mega Man games? Yes, you heard me right. I'll be replaying every single Mega Man game that has ever come out, every single one in the Classic series, every game in the X series except for X7, every game in the Legends series, every game in the series, every game in the Battle Network series, both CX games, and the 3 Star Force games. And this video marks the beginning of this journey as I go over the game that started it all, Mega Man 1. This game and I have a complicated relationship. I beat this game for the first time years ago and thought that it was a fun game. However, when I replayed it last time, I couldn't help but feel that the game was outdated. We're talking about tight controls and frustrating level designs, a relic of its era. Now, I understand that this is an NES game, but I'd rather come back to any other Mega Man game on the NES before this one. And yes, I understand that this game was the first one in the series. It was still a new concept and the developers were still figuring out how to make it work. The fact that Mega Man got so many sequels was great, because the developers were able to build upon the foundation laid by the previous entry, creating experiences that are more fulfilling and enjoyable. But for now, let's not talk about the sequels, and let's just focus on Mega Man 1. My goal with this video is to give this game another chance and analyze it on its own. As such, I replay the game one more time. Well, I still think that the game aged like milk. However, I ended up enjoying the game way more this time around. And while the game might not be perfect, there's still a lot to love about it. And this time around, I want to do justice to this game. The concept of Mega Man was created by Akira Kitamura, a former video game designer that worked in Capcom. The design of Mega Man as we all know it was created by Keiji Inafune, based on the sprite of the character made by Kitamura. Usually, in game development, concept art is designed first, before the sprite work is done. However, for Mega Man's creation, it was the other way around.
A lot of the character design for Mega Man is based upon some of the Japanese cartoons that I saw when I was a child. And when I was making this game, it was kind of like going back to my roots, going back to my childhood when I designed it. It was very fun to design that character.
And while Kitamura and Inafune are well-known figures behind the creation of the character, there's another important person behind Mega Man, Nobuyuki Matsushima. In 2011, there was an interview with Akira Kitamura and the manga artist Hitoshi Ariga that went over the development of the original Mega Man game, where Kitamura explains how Matsushima handled the programming in the game. Matsushima actually had a background in industrial machinery, which made him an excellent programmer because in his line of work, he could potentially harm someone's life. As such, he developed the habit of adding as many safety measures in his code as possible to handle edge cases. And this habit was also seen during the development of Mega Man, which at a professional level is quite fascinating. However, it resulted in slow code. But Kitamura worked around that limitation and somehow fitted in his idea for the game. Kitamura envisioned Mega Man as a game that could be finished in just 1 hour, but that would make players come back to it again and again. However, at the time Kitamura noticed an issue in the video game industry. Games were too difficult. So he tasked himself with the mission of replaying these games and understanding what made them so difficult in the first place. And by analyzing these games thoroughly, Kitamura realized that the key for fun difficulty was detailed, intricate enemy behavior and placement. And while at first Kitamura envisioned Mega Man as a shooting game with tons of enemies on the screen, after noticing the limitations of Matsushima's code, Kitamura stepped back and tried a different approach. Having less enemies on the screen, but having more interesting level layouts. The development of Mega Man is a story of how the team brought up so many cool ideas to the table, but that couldn't be implemented into the game due to limitations. However, the team worked around those limitations to still bring its ideas to life in some way or another. Originally, whenever Mega Man equipped a weapon, his appearance would change completely, with Mega Man's helmet displaying a symbol that represented the weapon that was active. Kitamura stated that this idea came from the tokusatsu show Ninja Captor, which was also a huge influence in Mega Man's design. Due to hardware limitations, this idea could not be implemented into the game. However, Matsushima came up with a solution for this problem. He proposed to change the palette of Mega Man's sprite whenever the weapon is changed. After many trials and tribulations, and with a development team of only 6 people, Mega Man 1 would finally release for the Nintendo Famicom on December 17, 1987, being the first of 6 games to be released for the console and the first in an ongoing franchise that counts with over 130 games released throughout different generations of consoles. Mega Man 1 is an extremely important pillar not only for the Mega Man franchise and Capcom, but also for the history of video games. Mega Man 1 is a 2D platformer, where the goal is to reach the end of the level by jumping over obstacles, eliminating enemies, and defeating a boss at the end of each level. In concept, all of these elements are standards even at the time. Many platformers did what Mega Man was doing. However, there was one key difference between Mega Man and those other platformers, and that is structure. In the 80s, most platformers had a set structure. You went from level 1 to level 2, from level 2 to level 3, and so on and so forth. And while some games try to shake up the formula by introducing warp zones that allow you to skip levels, the structure pretty much remains the same. If you boot up Super Mario Bros., you will always start at 1-1 and the next level will always be 1-2. That is the intended path that the developer set for the game. But what if the player could choose what level they want to start the game with? That's the question that Mega Man answered. When you boot up the game, this is a screen that you will see. You will be prompted to select one of 6 options, and depending on which one you choose, you will play a different level, with each level having their own unique layout, sets of enemies, mechanics, and boss fights. The idea here is that the player is not bound by the path designed by the developers. Instead, the player is free to create their own path. This level of freedom was not common at the time, and the way it was implemented was genius. At the end of each level, there is a boss fight against a Robot Master, an enemy that has both a larger health bar and a more complex behavior than the other enemies that you will find throughout the level. These battles can get really intense and tricky. However, if you manage to beat them, you get a special weapon. By default, Mega Man can only shoot enemies horizontally. There is no way for the character to change the direction of this projectile, forcing the player to position the character in such a way that you can hit enemies while also avoiding damage. Special weapons dropped by bosses have special quirks that allow Mega Man to work around these limitations, like a weapon that allows you to hit vertically. However, the biggest benefit of special weapons is that Robot Masters are weak against a specific type of weapon, meaning that they will take more damage from this weapon, making their boss fight way easier. And this right here is why Mega Man's structure works so well. The addition of the boss's weakness adds a layer of complexity when deciding in which order to tackle each level. When a player starts the game and doesn't have any special weapon, they might be tempted to just play any level. However, once they get their first special weapon, everything changes, as now the player must think strategically which level is best suited for the current set of weapons. There is just one issue. The game doesn't communicate directly what each boss weakness is, but that is something that developers took into consideration when designing each boss in the game. Instead of stating up front what is the best weapon for each boss, what the developers did was to attach each weakness according to the theme of each Robot Master. Cutman is a perfect example of this, as the character is based on scissors. They have scissors on top of their head, their weapons are flying scissors, But most importantly, there are two big rocks in the arena where the player faces Cutman. If Cutman is the first boss that the player faces, the inclusion of these two rocks might seem out of place. However, after facing Gutsman, the player will receive a special weapon that allows them to throw rocks at enemies. And if the player uses that special weapon against Cutman, they will deal a lot of damage. This is smart in many ways. Not only is the player being taught about boss weaknesses through level design, but it also makes sense thematically because this is just a game of rock, paper, and scissors. Rock beats scissors. That is why Gutsman's weapon is strong against Cutman.
Basically, when you think about it, there's not something in the world that is just stronger than everybody else. Almost everything has something it's stronger than and something that it's weaker to. Sort of like in scissors, rock, and paper. Scissors will beat paper, but it loses to the rock. Paper will beat the rock, but it loses to the scissors. So that's how the Mega Man weapons work.
And this design philosophy is seen throughout the entire game. Iceman's weapon can freeze enemies, but most importantly, it can freeze lava pillars, creating platforms where Mega Man can stand on. And coincidentally, the level that features the most lava pillars is Fireman, and as you might have guessed, Iceman's weapon is Fireman's weakness. This puzzle-like aspect is really cool, because it incentivizes out-of-the-box thinking and experimentation. On one hand, as you play the levels, you learn how to use these special weapons, and you learn some other special properties. And then, you use what you learn to beat the boss. But on the other hand, you make decisions on which levels to tackle first based on logic. But what makes this system even better is how customizable it feels. You can always try different combinations of levels, there are routes that are more optimal than others, and there are routes that are more challenging than others. It is up to the player to decide how they want to play the game, and for an NES title that is impressive. Not many games had an approach like that, and that added up a lot of replayability because even if all the levels are the same on every playthrough, you can always switch up the order in which the levels are tackled. That makes it so that every playthrough feels different despite going through the same challenges again and again, which is exactly what Kitamura was aiming for. Now, I have given enough praise to the structure of this game, but I would like to discuss what it is like to play Mega Man 1. Mega Man 1 is a really simple game to pick up. You only have 3 actions. Using the D-pad, you can move either to the left or right. And if you are colliding with ladders, you can move either up or down. With the A button you can jump, and with the B button you can fire your weapon. Additionally, if you press the start button, you will open a menu where you can select your active weapon. At the beginning of the game, you will only have access to your default weapon, but as you beat other bosses, the list will be filled with more options. This is all you need to know to play the game. But while it is easy to start playing the gameplay itself doesn't feel the best. For starters, Mega Man's movement feels slippery. Whenever you stop moving, the character does not fully stop at once. Instead, it's like the character slides for a short period of time before going to a full stop. And throughout most of the game, this is not really an issue. But there are few sections where platforms that you stand on are not that big, and you can easily fall off because of this issue. But the most infamous thing about the game feeling is how gravity and knockback works. Mega Man falls way too fast. This is especially noticeable in those moving platform sections in Gutsman's stage, which makes those jumps particularly tricky. But it also makes the invisible block sections in Iceman's stage harder, because you need to make some precise jumps. And the knockback is also way too high. Sections with a lot of pits and flying enemies can be rather stressful because you have to deal with both precise platforming and enemies that can throw you off. Now, I understand that this is the first Mega Man game ever made, and it was made by a development team of only 6 people. With that in mind, it is impressive how much this team was able to accomplish in terms of design, structure, and innovative mechanics. However, the gameplay is clunky. Mega Man does not feel good to control, and while this could be a deal breaker, there is one thing that saved this game, and that is the level design. As mentioned before, this game was made with the limitations in mind, and that is better reflected in how each level was designed. Kitamura's design philosophy centered around enemy placement, in which he laid down 4 important rules. Number 1. Single weak little enemies will appear in waves of 3 or 4 individuals, and to the extent possible, mixing up multiple enemies will be avoided. Number 2. Enemies will all use the same attacks. Number 3. Levels will use differences in terrain and enemy placement to adjust difficulty of a given section. And number 4. The difficulty of each enemy in the wave will gradually rise, but the last enemy to appear will be easier. These 4 principles will apply for half of the game. Yes, Kitamura came up with this philosophy halfway through the development, so these principles are not present throughout the whole experience. However, whenever you see them, that is when the level design shines the brightest. And what a better way to illustrate my point than to see how these principles are applied in practice. In a Legman stage, you will have sections where you need to climb ladders to reach the next room. A group of flying enemies called Watchers will appear. These enemies move vertically. They spawn both at the top and bottom section of the screen, and when Mega Man stands in the same height as them, they will go to an aggressive state where they shoot a projectile at Mega Man. Now, using the 4 rules of the enemy placement, let's see how these enemies are used in this stage. Rule number 1. The Watchers are introduced in the level with a wave of 3 of the same type of enemy, without mixing any other type of enemy nor hazard. Rule number 2. No other type of enemy is used in strings with Watchers in this level, so all enemies use the same type of attack. Number 3. While the first strings with Watchers consist of a ladder in the middle of the screen with Watchers spawning from left and right corner of the screen, later in the level we can see a screen where there are 2 ladders and Watchers spawn close to both ladders, making it so that the player has to take a different approach to deal with the enemies. And rule number 4. Whenever you get close to the top of the screen, another group of Watchers will show up from the bottom of the screen. These new Watchers can be dealt easily by just going up ladders and ignoring them altogether. As you could see, all 4 rules are applied for this particular enemy, and other types of enemies in the game can be analyzed in a similar fashion, but it is important to notice that not all enemies were designed the same. Considering the team was still learning their way through game development as they work on this project, and that Kitamura came up with these philosophies halfway through, it does make sense that not all strings are as thought out as the ones I described. However, the game is still fun and rewarding, and the difficulty, for the most part, scales naturally. But there is one issue I have with the level design, and it's how padded out some of the screens feel. The screens before a boss encounter can get really annoying, because they're basically hallways with enemies. Now, this wouldn't be that much of an issue, but if you lose the boss fight, you have to redo these screens. In some stages, that can be rather inoffensive, like Cutman, where the enemies are really easy to avoid. But they can get really irritating, like a Legman, where you need to slowly climb through 3 streams of just ladders with some electrical beam hazards that you need to time to go through. And if you time the beams wrongly, the knockback will push you back to the bottom screen, and you need to do the climb all over again. However, these screens only become an issue if you lose against the boss battle, which, to be fair, it is really hard in this game. And the reason for it is really funny. Mega Man 1 is a broken game. Every game has their fair share of bugs and glitches, some more than others. And Mega Man 1 is a game that was put together with hopes and dreams. Just take a look at this screen. The intended way is to avoid this enemy and go down the bottom ladder. Simple, right? Well, you can just do this. Now, this is a type of glitch that is situational. It helps you in some sections, but it is not something that useful. However, there is a really famous glitch that allows you to make almost every boss fight ridiculously easy. But first, let me show you the glitch in action. That was the most difficult boss in the game, defeated in just 10 seconds, and it was done suboptimally. This boss can take even less time to beat. And if you don't know anything about Mega Man 1, you might be confused about what just happened, but let me explain. In this game, most projectiles do not disappear automatically after hitting an enemy, meaning that their hitbox remains active. This is useful mainly to hit multiple enemies at once. However, stronger enemies and bosses take more than one hit from certain weapons to beat. To avoid active hitboxes from dealing damage multiple times to the same enemy, an invisibility timer is used to prevent that the enemy gets damaged for a short period of time. However, if you pause the game, the invisibility timer still goes on. And if you unpause the game after the timer runs out, the enemy will get hit again. That means that if you hit a boss with a powerful weapon, and while the hitbox of the weapon is colliding with the boss, you can rapidly pause and unpause the game to beat the boss without any effort whatsoever. This glitch is infamous for how easy it is to perform, and how it trivializes almost every boss fight in the game. Not all of them though, but you can still use this glitch against the majority of them. Now, this is not an intended mechanic, and I will not put this against the game. If anything, I think it is quite funny that this glitch exists, and if I'm being honest, this glitch can help you escape the Yellow Devil, which can be a really annoying fight to do the intended way. At the end of the day, this glitch is optional, and if you prefer to face the bosses as intended, more power to you. Even in its small broken state, Mega Man 1 still finds a way to give multiple options to the player to decide how to approach the game, and that's pretty cool. On another note, I would like to talk once again about special weapons. Before, I praised this system and what it brings to the table, and while special weapons are neat additions, the weapons themselves are flawed. At their best, special weapons are extremely useful, but at their worst, special weapons are useless. This is especially noticeable with Gutsman weapon that requires a specific rock object to activate the weapon. This rock block does not show up in every level, and most boss rooms don't even have them, so for the majority of the playthrough this weapon does absolutely nothing. Even in spots in which it might be useful, like that corner of Electman stage where you get the magnet beam, you can avoid using Gutsman weapon altogether and instead break the blocks using Electman weapon. Even useful weapons like the one you get from Cutman can be rather uncomfortable to use due to the weird angle of the projectile. Another example is Mudman's weapon, which takes way too long to activate. Most moving enemies can avoid the blast of the bomb easily. And while players are free to route levels in any order, in my experience throughout multiple playthroughs, I always found myself leaving both Gutsman and Mudman stages last because the weapons they provide are not that useful. This is not necessarily a bad thing, if anything it's really fun to optimize routing, but it also diminishes the reward that obtaining these special weapons should make you feel. But when special weapons are good, they are really good. Iceman's weapon freezes annoying enemies that have tricky movement patterns, and it's also especially useful for the big eye enemies that often appear at the end of some stages. Electman weapons give you a vertical attack to hit enemies in tricky spots. It is also quite spammable on hallways with tons of enemies moving towards Mega Man, and the weapon deals a lot of damage to the Yellow Devil if you use the boss glitch. But the best weapon in the game might be the Magnet Beam. The Magnet Beam is the only weapon in the game that you don't get from defeating a boss. Instead, you can only get this weapon as a collectible item in Electman stage, in a section that requires either Gutsman or Electman's weapon. Now, the Magnet Beam is also the only weapon in the game that does no damage at all. Instead, what makes this weapon so good is that it creates platforms that you can use to stand on, and as long as you have enough ammo, you can spam these platforms as long as you want. This is huge because if you use this weapon smartly, you can skip annoying sections or even entire stages. Overall, the weapon system is a great idea. It is a huge reason why this game is so replayable and fun. However, the iteration of this system in Mega Man 1 lacks a lot of polish as not all weapons were created equally, making it so that most weapons are only really useful for boss weaknesses. It is exactly this point which summarizes how I feel about the entire game. There are a lot of cool and creative ideas, but they lack refinement. Mega Man 1 is a flawed game, but it is also a lot of fun. So far, I have talked about this game in the context when it was released. There wasn't a game like this before, and despite its shortcomings, it's commendable how good this experiment came out. This might not be the best Mega Man game, but it is the most important one. This game laid the foundation for the next entries. All my criticism towards this game are things that the sequels improve upon. Mega Man feels way better to control in Mega Man 2, and the sequels just kept improving the game feeling, adding new actions, new mechanics, and better special weapons. And perhaps the original Mega Man 1 for the NES might not be your cup of tea, but that's not the only version of this game. There is also Mega Man The Wily Wars, a remake of the first 3 Mega Man games for the Sega Genesis. And there is also Mega Man Power Up, a 3D remake of the first game for the PSP, with a cute chibi art style, 2 new levels, multiple playable characters including all Robot Masters, Proto Man and Roll, new control options, extra challenges, and a fully fleshed level maker. This is my preferred version of Mega Man 1 because of the improvements to the old levels and the new content. Now, I would like to end this video on a personal note. While I don't fully love Mega Man 1, it is a game that I respect. My original Mega Man video is currently my second most watched video of the channel, and it's a video that I'm not proud of. I didn't even write a script for it, so I knew that I had to do another Mega Man video, and now was the best moment to do it as we're looking forward to Mega Man 12. This franchise has made it this far because of the passion of those 6 developers that worked on the very first game. This franchise has gone a long way. It has reached the sky, but it has also hit rock bottom many and many times. But it is the love and passion of both developers and fans that has kept it alive for so long. And as we move forward to the future, we must not forget the game that started it all. Happy 2026 everyone! If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, write down a comment about your favorite part of the video or your favorite Mega Man game or anything that you would like to share. I'm looking forward to reading your comments. And if you'd like to see more content like this, consider subscribing. That supports the channel and it also motivates me to keep making more content. Thanks for making it this far, and until next time.